So next coming to the stage is Ben DeJarnette, and he's going to be talking about a subject. I'm really excited to hear this talk because he talks about something that's near and dear to my heart. Why we're betting on user engagement, not user reach, to build a sustainable business. Ben is a journalist in Portland and the co-author of Reimagining Journalism in a Post-Truth World: How Late-Night Comedians, Internet Trolls, and Savvy Reporters Are Transforming News. I mean, come on, after hearing that, who isn't excited to hear this talk? Let's give it up for Ben DeJarnette. Come on, come on, woo!
Thank you. All right, first things first. Any other friends of the pod in the house? All right, good to know I'm in good company. Not trying to make a Mark Zuckerberg Silicon Valley fashion statement. The t-shirt will make sense by the end of the presentation. But I'll start with Bridgeliner. So Bridgeliner is part of the Wear By Us family. We now have 4 brands in 4 cities. And each of those brands had its own tone, its own voice, its own kind of editorial focus. But share a couple of things in common. One, we send out a daily email newsletter. That's the main thing we send out into the world. And we all have this tagline, "Live like you live here." And it really reflects our mission to try and help people make the most of the city where they live. So what does that mean? You know, if we were a traditional media outlet, that might mean hiring a team of smart journalists, writing up a Portland handbook with a list of 50 taco shops to see around town and the 10 best places to get your pumpkin spice latte this fall. And we'd basically sort of tell you, this is how you live here. This is how to live like you live here. And if you do that well, you can build an audience. I mean, that's the model of local news, right? But for our impact model at Bridgeliner and our business model to work, we need to build more than an audience. We need to build kind of a core group of super fans who love our work, who share our work, who come to our events, who pay for a membership, who help spread the word about us, help us grow, and who really love what we do. So we think about live like you live here less as kind of an information dissemination thing and more about shared discovery with a community of locals. So just one example, recently we wanted to do a feature of some of the great photographers in Portland on Instagram. So we just started with a call out. We said, who's your favorite photographer? Posted on Instagram. We had 50 or more nominations. We started interviewing some of them, posting their photos in the Q&A on Instagram and in our newsletter. That sort of led to more nominations and suggestions. And we were able to kind of create this ongoing series and conversation and moment of shared discovery instead of just a listicle of the 10 Instagram users to follow in Portland based on our expert opinion, right? So that's not just a one-off thing that we do. That we try to build this public-powered model into all of our work. So another example is our PDX Explained project, which follows the model that Jen Brandel and Harkin developed a few years ago. It's pretty simple. So we start by inviting people to send us their questions about anything in the city. It's history, it's culture, it's sports, it's politics, why there's a pothole in the street that hasn't been fixed in 5 years. Send us all your questions. We pick 3 a month usually to put up for a vote, and then we let our community decide which they want us to answer. So we get some amazing questions. The first month, we had someone who asked about why there are so few grocery stores east of 82nd Avenue in Portland and how we can address those food deserts. We had someone else ask kind of a wonky question about why the Portland area has so many school districts and why we have some that are tiny like Park Rose and other that are huge like PPS. But the question that won our community vote is what happens to the compost and the food scraps that we put into the green bins on the curb? Like, where does that go after it gets picked up? What happens to it? So we set about answering this question, as journalists do. We interviewed experts. We set up a site visit. And sort of following this public-powered Harkin model, we also invited the person who asked the question to come and join us. So in the left there, that's a photo of our reader, Karen. She asked the question. She came with us to Recology Organics, helped us report out the story. we shared that as a newsletter feature the next day, so told folks what we learned. This is what we saw there. This became kind of a series of updates throughout the month. It took people along this journey. And then finally, at the end of that, we got around to answering the question, doing the video and the story that would normally be the only product. But we kind of created this month-long moment of shared discovery, shared learning, where we were sort of metaphorically taking people along on the journey and sort of literally taking Karen with us to report out the story. Part of me wishes it ended there, but this is an email we got from someone who works in the composting business. And I think he's a little bit harsh, but he wanted to let us know that what goes into the green bins is not compost. Okay, what goes into the green bins is food scraps, or food waste and yard scraps. And then it becomes compost by going through the composting process, right? You can't put compost in and get compost out, you dummies. So he let us know. And, if we were a kind of traditional news outlet, we probably would have run a correction kind of like this. Would have buried it at the bottom of the story on our website and used kind of the most detached, passive language possible to acknowledge this mistake, right? It's the Homer Simpsons, mistakes were made. But we actually see corrections and any feedback we get from our community as a real opportunity, not only to show that we're human, we make mistakes, fine, but also to create another one of those shared learning, shared discovery moments. So we started this correction by saying, if you ever ask your roommate to take out the compost, you're technically speaking nonsense, and last week we did too. And then we went on, we kind of gave some context. We shouted out our whistleblower who caught our mistake and thanked him for that, and then gave a little bit of extra information to help people kind of understand this linguistic thing, or the terminology thing from a whiz on the inside, in a way that I think felt kind of humble and authentic and honest, instead of defensive, as corrections can often be. So that's a little bit about how we work at Bridgeliner. I want to zoom out and talk a little bit about what the journalism profession as a whole is learning about community building. I tried to whittle it down to kind of 3 points. So be human, be responsive, and always be listening. So I'll start with the first one, and I said I'd come back to the shirt. There's more on that as well. But the guys at Pod Save America, if you don't know it, it's a political podcast by some former Obama staffers twice a week. They help progressives kind of make sense of and not go crazy in the Trump era. They do an amazing job being themselves on this podcast, right? They mix in stories about their weddings and their dogs in between kind of updates on the Kavanaugh hearing. They have live events where they invite people on stage with them. They do Facebook Lives like this one, where they're calling their senator and showing people what that actually looks like. They respond to people on Twitter in a meaningful way and have conversations with readers on social media and via Facebook Lives where they're answering their questions. So they do a great job of this, and it's a huge part of why they've built this fan club for their work and for their podcast. Another example I love is David Farenholt. So he won a Pulitzer Prize last year or 2 years ago for the series he did for the Washington Post, investigating Donald Trump, or the Trump Foundation's charitable contributions. And he was calling hundreds of these veterans-affiliated nonprofits to find out if they had, in fact, received a donation from the Trump Foundation. And it probably would have been more user-friendly, certainly more searchable if he had uploaded those notes into a web form, created kind of a database online, and shared the link out that way. But what he did instead, he just wrote in his notebook every call, what he found out, one per line, gets to the bottom of the page, takes a photo, tweets it out. And he does this time and time again. And he builds this huge following of people following this project and getting really invested in it, sending him other charities that he should call and add to his list. And as the project went on, they ended up helping him kind of solve this mystery, get to the bottom of this question that he admits he wouldn't have been able to answer alone without I think what he called his Twitter army, like helping him find a painting in Tennessee or some obscure part of the story that he was able to find out because he had built this following for his work. And I don't think it'd be the same if he was tweeting out a link to a web article. There was something about seeing that notebook and seeing his handwriting and what he was finding in real time and really taking people on that journey. So be responsive. I think journalists are realizing, especially now, that it's not enough anymore to send your work out in the world and say, we're the New York Times, we're the Washington Post, we're the Oregonian, trust us, right? Because the reality is that people trust institutions generally and media and journalism specifically less than they ever have. So I think what journalists are understanding is that building trust has to be an active process now. It's not implied, it's not sort of given inherently. You have to earn it, right? And a big part of that is being responsive. So you see the Washington Post doing AMA, Ask Me Anything sessions on Reddit, and allowing people to ask questions of reporters who have broken big stories or of editors and their news desks. You have more journalists and more publications, not just having a Facebook account where they dump their content and try and get traffic, but actually engaging in those comments, looking for opportunities to add context or respond to a question or just have a human interaction with some person on social media. And you even see media companies start to use text messaging or one-to-one messaging platforms to create these opportunities for conversation with their superfans, right? So if you have ever heard WAMU's 1A radio show or podcast, they have thousands of people on this text club. I'm one of them. I get a text message every few days saying, hey, we're covering this. What questions do you have, or what experiences do you have with this issue that we're doing on the radio? And then some of those are become part of the show. So the responsive element, I think, is huge for building trust and earning trust. And then my favorite, always be listening. I've already mentioned Jen Brandel and Harkin, kind of that process behind our PDX Explained project. But she realized something really important about journalists, which is that even though we really value democracy, we like to call ourselves kind of the fourth estate, the fourth pillar of democracy, we're actually really bad at democracy, right? Think about it. We traditionally decide what stories to tell, who to interview, what questions to ask, what quotes to include. All of the work of making our journalism happens behind closed doors with no input from the public that we claim to serve. So you wouldn't call that a democracy. You would call that an autocracy. And Jen's point is that we can flip that around because journalists don't have a monopoly on smart questions. And when you start listening to those questions, you not only do better storytelling, right? Find more original ideas that wouldn't have come from your newsroom, but you help people feel valued and a part of the process. Kind of the extension of that is that people have good questions. They also have expertise and knowledge to contribute. Journalists don't have a monopoly on that either. So De Correspondent in the Netherlands has done an amazing job. Every time they start a big investigation, they kind of announce it to the world. They don't keep it a secret. They say, hey, we're looking into this. What do you know? Who can you connect us to? What knowledge do you have about this that will help our reporting? And they have 60,000 members who then feel valued. They're not just consumers. They're a participant, a kind of a valued member of this community that's trying to learn together. So what's the business case? What are the results? So I just mentioned De Correspondent. They started as a crowd-funded publication maybe 5 or 6 years ago. They already have more than 60,000 paying members, which is incredible for a Dutch language publication in the Netherlands. And they're now expanding to an English language publication in the US. So they've done fantastic with this public-powered model. Harkin, there's tons of data about how stories produced with that Harkin approach get shared more, liked more, longer time on page, those kind of engagement metrics. But my favorite is that they did this research study with Bitch Media, which is based here in Portland, and they found that readers who engaged with Harken content were 2 to 5 times more likely to become paying members than readers who didn't engage with that content. So it was not just creating audience, not just creating reach, but creating fans of their brand who would then eventually become paying members. Bridgeline Air, we're young, we're 6 months into this, we don't have a ton of data on the business side, but one number we are really proud of is that even as we've grown to several thousand readers here in Portland, we've maintained a 40% or higher average daily open rate for our email newsletter. So the average, I think, for media in general is closer to like 10, 15%. It's like, that's crazy that people are opening us that much kind of every day, starting their mornings with our newsletter. And I think, we'll see. Maybe next year I can tell you more about the business case of that. But we think we are laying the foundation kind of for both a successful publication, a community, and a conversation worth joining, as well as a business that can grow. And then I said I'd get back to the shirt. So this is my Pod Save America shirt. I say there I paid $25 for it. I actually didn't pay $25 for it. My girlfriend bought me this shirt for Christmas, the same Christmas that I also bought her this t-shirt without any coordination. So we have 2 $25 Pod Save America shirts. When Pod Save America's sister podcast, Love It or Leave It, was in Portland, we paid about that much to go see them at a live show. We listened to basically every episode. I did something that I thought I would never do, which is use a promo code to buy a product that was advertised on Pod Save America. I thought I was above advertisements, but I have the Tommy John underwear to prove that I am not. And so Pod Save America has made a lot of money off of me, and it makes a lot of money off of all these people. And I tried to kind of think about, how did they get there? I mean, what are they doing so right that I can learn from, and that other people who are trying to build the community-driven media publications can learn from? And I think it kind of follows 3 steps. You've got to start with a smart format and a smart concept, right? Like, of course, a podcast by 3 senior Obama staffers in the Trump era is gonna attract some attention, right? So they were at the right thing at the right moment. So people were gonna tune in and give them a chance. And I was one of those people, and there's millions of others, right? So that's the first step. To keep those people, for them to listen to every podcast, for that podcast to kind of grow momentum, grow reach, it's got to be great content, right? If they were boring guys, if they didn't have anything smart to say, if they weren't funny, it wouldn't work, right? So smart format, great content, you should earn supporters, right? Who are listening to everything you make, reading everything you make, maybe sharing some of that out on social media, helping you gain exposure. But then there's that next step, right? I read the New York Times every day. I read other publications. I listen to a ton of podcasts. I've only got 1 t-shirt. I've only been to 1 live show, right? So what's that like special sauce? What made me a fan? And I think it's the way that they handle engagement. I think it's the way that they think about building a community around their work, whether it's having people take a pledge to vote, whether it's having these Facebook Lives where they're answering questions, whether it's those moments when they're responding to someone on Twitter who tweeted out a photo wearing their Pod Save shirt, whether it's just being human on their podcast and talking about their dogs and their weddings. That kind of meaningful community building, audience engagement, that's what creates the fans, and that's when you start to get people buying the t-shirts, showing up to the shows, buying the memberships. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.